Today we're going to begin the Protestant Reformation in AP European History. This is the typed outline that you're going to begin the chapter with. As you can see here, this is Roman numeral 1, and if you scroll down, you'll see one other page that will finish up Roman numeral 1. So remember what you can do: either jot this down on your own paper and fill it in as you watch the PowerPoint recordings, or if you have access to a printer, you can print it out and fill it in as you watch the recordings. So either way, make sure you get the important information written down for study purposes. Now, before I actually get started on the causes of the Reformation, I'm going to just give a brief introduction with some background. You don't have to write this down, but it does help for you to understand what the situation was as the Reformation is going to get underway. So first, when we look at the word Protestant, Protestant is any Christian religion other than Catholicism. So we're talking about Baptist, Methodist, those type of faiths. The Pope is not their leader. Now at one time, virtually all Christians were Catholic, but we know that is about to change. So we're going to talk about when, why, and who made that happen. If you look at the word Reformation, we see within that word reform. When you want to reform something, you are wanting to make it better, change something. Also want to point out the word protest in Protestant. So we've got people who are not happy with things going on within the Catholic Church, as well as the leaders and their behaviors. And so there is this outcry for reform or change. Okay, so keep in mind, the criticism that we're going to be talking about is to make the church better. No one's trying to purposely destroy the Catholic Church. It's like when there are things you don't like about your school. You're not trying to tear down the school or destroy it verbally. You're trying to give some constructive criticism to make it better. And we all know that here at Captain Shreve, our administration is very open to change and making things better for us. So now we're ready to jump right into the causes of the Reformation. All right, so as you can see here on your letter A of your typed outline, we're going to start with crisis that were taking place during the latter part of the Middle Ages that will hurt the prestige of the clergy as well as the church as a whole. Now, so that you don't mess up your outline, let me show you where you're going to write these 3 examples of crisis that were going on. You can see under your number 1, you have a little A, B, and a C. So for each of those letters, you are writing one of these crises. So for A, you can put the Babylonian captivity, which was in the 14th century, and we'll actually be discussing that on the next couple of slides. Then for little b, you can write down the Great Schism, which was from 1377 to 1417. And again, you're going to get the details about that. And then for c, you can write down the failure of the conciliar movement, which took place in the 15th and early 16th centuries. So write each one down per letter and then leave some room for an explanation of each crisis. And let me point out that all 3 of these crises will hurt the prestige of the clergy as well as the church as a whole. Remember, clergy means you are working for the church. They are paying you as a leader of the church. Now, to understand the Catholic Church, you do need to see this hierarchy of leadership. This is important to point out before we move on to talk about the actual Reformation. So in the Catholic Church, when you're looking at who has the ultimate authority, it is the Pope. So he's going to be at the top of this hierarchy pyramid. Next, you have the cardinals. Then you have archbishops. Sorry about that. Hold on. Under the archbishops, you have bishops. Then you have priests. And you have deacons. And then you have the laity, which are the members of the church. So these individuals here are what we would call the clergy, okay? But the laity are members of the church. They're not part of the clergy. Yes, they take part in the actual religious services, but they are not taking vows like these clergymen have. So I wanted you to know the difference. Each of these clergymen have their own specific role and responsibility within the church. No need to go over all those details, but I did want to point out the hierarchy so you know where the authority is within the Catholic Church. So we've written down the three crises, one for each letter, A, B, and C, that's going to hurt the prestige of the clergy and the church as a whole. What I want to do is explain to you what Gallicanism and Unum Sanctum is, because both of these are related back to the Babylonian captivity. So for you to understand the Babylonian captivity, you need to understand what these two terms are first. They are not on the PowerPoint, so I'm going to need you to listen and write this down, and I will repeat it to make sure that you are getting the correct information written down. Gallicanism, so write this down. The French believed they should control the French churches rather than the Pope in Rome. One more time. The French believe they should control the French churches rather than the Pope in Rome. So they should control the churches rather than the Pope in Rome. So what was happening is the Pope, who operates out of Rome, Italy, was taxing all churches no matter where they were, and the kings were not happy about this because they want their money for their own country and not for it to go back to Rome. So I'm going to give you the example, like I said, of France, okay? They obviously think they should control where the money goes with their churches and it not go all the way to the Pope in Rome. So what happened was, and you don't have to write down this part that I'm saying, the French king was Philip IV, and he basically said, I have the right to tax my people. Well, the Pope at the time is basically telling the French king, you have to have my permission to do this, okay? But the king thinks that all of his subjects, including clergymen, are under the jurisdiction of the crown. So you've got this struggle between universal sovereignty of the Pope versus the royal sovereignty of the monarch, okay? So clearly the Pope at the time wanted to send a strong message to the French king. And he issued a statement known as Unum Sanctum in the early 1300s. And what this was, you can first put it was written in response to Gallicanism. You now know what Gallicanism is. So written in response to Gallicanism. And it's a warning by the Pope to the French king. Again, it's a warning by the Pope to the French king that he must remain loyal to the church in Rome. He must remain loyal to the church in Rome. If not, if he doesn't remain loyal, the Pope says the King of France will be sent to hell when he dies. So it's pretty strong. Again, if the French king's not loyal to the church in Rome, he's going to be sent to hell when he dies. So basically, the French king better do what the Pope is telling him to do, because the Pope has ultimate authority within the church. So everybody better listen to him. You also might want to make a note that Unum Sanctum translates into English to mean one holy. Okay, so you can jot that down, one holy. All right, so you can imagine how furious the French king was when he received this statement from the Pope. And you know how the French king responded? He sent troops to capture the Pope and bring him back to France in order for him to have some type of punishment. Well, later, there's some Italian nobles who will rescue this Pope. And then after the Pope died, the French king will pressure cardinals to elect a new Pope that is from France. And so that French Pope that gets elected will remain in Avignon, France for the next, many, many years. So instead of the Pope being in the traditional location of Rome, Italy, this Pope and popes after him for many years will be in Avignon, France. So that's going to bring us to the Babylonian captivity. So what I would write down under your little a, Babylonian captivity, I wouldn't put this down, but what I would write is this. So listen and write this down. That the Pope was kidnapped and forced to live in Avignon, France. And here's the spelling of Avignon, France, if you need it. The Pope was kidnapped and forced to live in Avignon, France, under the order of the French king. So live in Avignon, France, under the order of the French king. Then you can put that there are 7 successive popes who will rule from Avignon. And I believe it's 72 years. That's how long we're talking, that the Pope will be ruling not from Rome, but from Avignon, France. So you can see that this is going to damage the prestige of not only the church, but of course, the leadership within that church. It says especially in England and Germany. And you can see this is an image of the papal palace in Avignon. You could actually go and visit it today. I've been there, and it's a pretty remarkable place to see where the Pope lived for all of these years since he wasn't in Rome. So an easy way to remember this, captivity. Someone is being held against their will. Clearly the Pope was kidnapped and forced to be somewhere he doesn't want to be. Babylonian is just a term that was borrowed from the period of when the Jews were being held captive by Babylonians. So that's why it is being referenced here for the Babylonian captivity. So once again, Babylonian captivity, Pope was kidnapped, forced to live in Avignon, France, under the order of the French king. And you might want to make a note that the French king was Philip IV. Our second crisis of the 14th and 15th century that hurt the prestige of the Catholic Church is the Great Schism. So you already wrote that title on little b, and what you can write underneath that is a brief description of what this is. Schism is basically chaos. You're not sure what is going on in a schism. Well, what happened was there are 2 popes who were elected at the same time. You're going, how in the world does this happen? Well, cardinals that were in Rome and there were cardinals in France decided that they were each going to elect a pope. So you had a pope in Rome. At the same time, you had a pope in France. And neither of these popes recognized the other. To complicate the situation even further, there was a meeting by cardinals to elect a third pope to kind of X out the other 2, but the other 2 popes refused to resign. So literally, y'all, at one time in history, there were 3 popes trying to rule at the exact same time. So you can imagine how much this damaged the prestige of the church, because in the meantime, the kings are becoming more powerful while all of this is going on. This definitely shows weakness within the Catholic Church. All right, we're about to move on to the last crisis, but I need to stop the video in order to start that one.